What is up, y'all? Cam here. This video is specifically made for people that are looking to dungeon grind on their way from 25 to 40. In this video, I've covered all classes and the talent builds and runes that I would use for leveling. Now, if you're going to look over in this vicinity, I'll put up all the talent builds that I have available within this video. And then in the description, you can find timestamps to each of the build setups, and that way you can just go directly there. If you enjoy the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. That would be fantastic. It's quite difficult to get people to subscribe, I'm finding out. Anyway, enjoy the video. Jumping right in, let's go ahead and start with Feral Druid. Now, I want to say right off the bat that I'm not going to be going power shifting for this spec. The reason I'm not going power shifting is that I like to have pretty high mana into these pulls in case I need to pop out and do a regrowth on the tank, right? Because you're going to be doing chain pulls, you're going to be doing AoE pulls as you're grinding. So I like having that flexibility and not being out of mana because I've spent it all power shifting. Also, power shifting doesn't quite have the same value as it does in, for example, BFD, where you have time to regenerate your mana in between boss fights. So I'll go ahead and go straight into my build. We're reducing the cost of Mangle by 5 here. Fantastic talent. Feral Aggression is what you're going to go into right now if you don't want to respec at level 32. The reason I mentioned 32 is that's when you get access to Ferocious Bite, and that's when this talent will become valuable. Until then, it basically does almost nothing, but your other options are 2 points into Brutal Impact and 3 points into Thick Hide. So you're welcome to do that if you want to respec midway through. I don't think it's worth it. I'm going to go ahead and go into Sharpened Claws for 6% additional crit, and then we're taking Feline Swiftness, baby. We're going to be flying. Do not listen to any guy that tells you not to take this for... I don't care what damage you're doing. Like, it does not matter. We're taking this talent. It's amazing. And then we're going to go 1 into Predatory Strikes. This is better than Blood Frenzy at level 25, which we are, by the way, with this build so far. The reason for that is Blood Frenzy really benefits mostly once you get a reason to spend combo points. For example, in this case, Ferocious Bite. We don't have that till 32, so it's just not quite as good as the raw attack power you're going to be getting from Predatory Strikes. So we're going to go 2 into Predatory Strikes, then we're taking Blood Frenzy. And then we're going Fairy Fire Feral. This is great reduction of armor. Be using this as you're switching to new mobs, especially if you have a lot of physical or melee DPS. Then we're going Savage Fury, 20% damage on Mangle, nothing to scoff at. That leaves us with 2 additional points before we can go to the next part of the tree. That's going to be Feral Charge, just a good overall talent to have. And then Brutal Impact, give us a little longer on that stun, also a good one to have. Now we're going to go Heart of the Wild. This will finish us off. It'll give us 20% int overall, and then additional strength while in bear. At least that's what we care about from this talent. And then you'll be level 40 and you can respec as needed. So I think this is going to be really powerful. It's a good supportive build, and it's just going to do also a lot of good single target damage. Druid just struggles with AoE, and there's not really any way around that unless you wanted to play like Resto for this leveling phase, which you could do. Anyway, let's move on. For Hunter, I don't think there's anything wrong with going a Beast Mastery spec where you're basically just picking up all the damage abilities for your pet. I think it's just going to be strong in general for leveling. But if we're thinking more about AoE, which is what I'll build out here, I think an Explosive Shot setup is going to work the best. So let's look at Marksmanship here, and we're going to go ahead and start reducing the cost of our shots and stings by 10% with Efficiency. From there, we're going to take 5% increased crit chance on lethal shots. Here, we're going to take Aim Shot. I don't know how useful it'll be, but I think it's worth 1 talent point to get it out of the way. And then we're going to take Hawkeye. I think the range is better than the mile increase you're getting here from Hunter's Mark. But now that we need to move past this, we'll take Hunter's Mark. And then we're going to go ahead and work on Mortal Shots. That's going to give us just bigger crits in general, but also those explosive shots are going to crit bigger, which is massive. Then we're going to go into Barrage. 15% extra damage on your multi-shot is great. You won't get Volley till 40, but multi-shot really does a ton of your damage, so this is a great pick. At this point, I think, you could take Scattershot for CC and just general utility. It's good for interrupting spells. It is short range, though, but I guess the yard from Hawkeye works as well. So 21 yards on this, not terrible. You could also go Hunter's Mark. I think I'm going to go 1 into Scattershot and then 1 into Hunter's Mark. Then we're going to go ranged weapon spec, and then you're done. You're level 40. So I think with this, you're going to be using Explosive Shot and just racking up as much damage as possible. I think this will fare quite nicely in the AoE dungeon grinds. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Mage now. There are so many potential options you could do for Mage, and I don't think you can really go wrong as long as you're bringing some kind of AoE, be it Blizzard, Flame Strike, Arcane Explosion. Obviously, I think every Mage should have Living Flame and Living Bomb. So as far as what I think, now that I've flopped my opinion multiple times, I'm going to go ahead and say that Frost is the way to go. Now, elemental precision, I think, with 4%, you should be good here. 6 to be safe is probably not bad because you're not going to be using Frostbolt really anyway. We'll go ahead and take that. Next, we're going to want to go improve Frost Nova. This is just a good activator for your Shatter, as well as it's just a really powerful ability in general. From there, we're going to go Ice Shards. This is going to increase our critical strike damage. This is going to be useful for when we're hitting those improved Cone of Colds on the Shatter. I'm going to go ahead and take Cold Snap here as well as improved Blizzard, and then we're going to put another point into Ice Shard. So improved Blizzard, I think, is you should just take it. It may not be exactly necessary because you're not like AoE pulling and all that by yourself, that is, but it will help if you rip aggro off your tank, which may happen relatively easily with you using Living Flame and regeneration as well, healing yourself and the tank, right? So we're going to go straight into Shatter here. This is just too good of a talent to pass up, and that'll take us straight to Ice Block. Now we can reduce the mana cost of our Frost spells and increase the range and everything like that for the cone. This is all really great. I think you could make an argument for Arctic Reach. It's super beneficial for Frost Mage. You could also go improve Cone of Cold here. I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm going to go improve Cone of Cold first, and I think that's good. Arctic Reach is 1 point, and then Winter's Chill. I don't think this is worth it, and the reason I say that is because this just takes too long to ramp up on these pulls. Like, I think mobs are going to be dead. So I think we're going to go ahead and take Arctic Reach, and then we're going to take Ice Shards, and then we're going to start going points into Frost Channeling, and this will get us to level 40. So I think this is going to be just a really solid build. You have your normal cooldowns that you get from runes that are really powerful, but then also you have this giant improved Cone of Cold Shatter combo, and you have Ice Block if things go sour. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Paladin. I'm going to go through 2 specs, Protection and Retribution for Paladin. I think you should go Sword and Board and not Two-Hander, and the reason I say that is because there's a lot of disarms in Stockades as well as other dungeons of the level range. Also, you're going to start to see more stuns and interrupts and things like that coming out of dungeons. So having a shield that has value while you're stunned or facing the wrong direction, whatever it may be, is better than having the two-hander in my opinion. And you'll also get access to Consecrate with this build, which I think is very important, right, for these bigger pulls. So I'm going to go ahead and start the build. We're going to go 10% intellect. I think 10% strength is great and all, but if you're going to wipe or have issues on a paladin, it's going to be because you run out of mana. So I think these points are, while they're less valuable here from a raw number perspective, from what it's giving you, like with the intellect and the mana, it's just better, in my opinion. So we're going to go there, and then we're going to take 15% on an improved Seal of Righteousness. This is great, and then Consecrate. And we're going to take Readout here, which will give us that 30% extra block when you're a victim of a crit. And that's our level 25 starting build. As we're going past 25 here, I'm going to go 3 points into Precision to get that extra hit rating. And then we're going to take Guardian's Favor. This is great. You should be using Bop a lot, by the way, as a tank, right, to save your healers, or, for example, your Arcane Mages, right, if they're doing big pulls with regeneration and they get aggro, this can be a great tool to save them. So I think this is better than your 4% you'd get from Toughness. Now, Kings you can take if you don't have a Hunter. I'm not going to take it for this build. I'm going to go straight into Improved Righteous Fury. This generates a ton more extra threat. This is fantastic. You want to get this as soon as possible. Then we're going to put points into Shield Spec, 2 points, increase our damage absorbed by our shield by 20%. At this point, you could take Improved Hammer of Justice, but I'm going to go ahead and continue with Shield Spec, and we're going to go some into Toughness at this point. I think you could also make an argument for Improved Diva Aura, but I like to run Ret Aura, so we're going to go ahead and just go into Toughness. Again, I think all these are kind of interchangeable, so I wouldn't worry too much about this and put it where you want. And at this point, you're level 40, you can take Blessing of Sanctuary or whatever, but I think this is going to be what you want. I don't think there's going to be a reason to respec into Blessing of Sanctuary because you'd lose Consecrate at that point. So, for a leveling build, I think you're not going to be using Blessing of Sanctuary. All right, let's talk about Paladin runes real quick. The reason I want to mention this is because we have an option, in my opinion, for chest runes of Divine Storm and Aegis. Divine Storm is better if you're doing those skirmishy pulls, right? You're just kind of constantly clearing without stopping for mana, but not really doing big pulls. If you're doing big pulls, you're going to want to go Aegis. That gives you just increased block value, increased block chance. These are going to be extremely valuable. It doesn't stack with Readout, but it will make sure that you're keeping closer to a 40% block value more often, which when you're talking about all these mobs, you can reduce a lot of damage from that. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Ret now. For Ret, I'm going to go ahead and put 5 points into Benediction and 5 points into Improved Blessing of Might. I don't really think there's a ton of value in these talents just for damage. If you're doing some kind of Ret tanking build, it would be different than this. This is just a pure damage build. So we'll go Seal of Command, and then we'll get 5% crit from Conviction. At this point, I'm taking the movement speed. This actually works indoors, so this is just a fantastic talent. Really great to have. Honestly, if you want to start at level 25, you can do something like this. You're going to lose out on 2% crit, and if you're doing stockades, I would recommend just taking the crit initially instead of Pursuit of Justice. But if you need that extra speed for running, like, it's actually not terrible, and you're losing 2% crit, you'll level up quickly. Not the end of the world either way. Moving on, let's go ahead and take Improve Judgment here, just for the lack of not better points. We'll take Sanctity Aura. By the way, I do think taking Improve Ret Aura is pretty good, especially if you have a tank that's doing big pulls. I think you could put the points into here, use that, and maybe sub out Sanctity Aura. Although for your solo DPS, this is going to be the play. Then we're going to go ahead and take Two-Handed Weapon Spec. This will give us 6% additional damage. And then this last one is kind of do whatever. Vindication doesn't work on like PvE mobs. It's a PvP based ability, so not really useful on all servers. I'm gonna probably take Improved Seal of Crusader. You're not really gonna use this in a dungeon environment, but maybe on some bosses it could be useful. Then our last 5 points are gonna go into Vengeance. We're 39 here, and then you'll level up and you'll be able to put your last point into whatever and respec at that point. But I think this build is gonna be solid. Gives you access to that move speed, gives you access to good damage. You're buffing your two-handed weapons, you're buffing your holy damage, and then also you get Vengeance, which is giving you that 15% buff after a crit. So strong build here. I think it's gonna be very solid. Just wanted to briefly mention on the runes here, it looks like Exorcism and Divine Storm are swapped on what rune slot they are on Wowhead, but you can ignore that. Divine Storm is a chest rune and Exorcism is a leg rune, but anyway, what I said on these remains true. I think there is a potential sub for Seal of Martyrdom on Divine Storm, and I mentioned that because it actually gives mana back to the party, so it can allow your entire group to go faster. So even though you're losing damage on that Divine Storm, you're generating yourself additional mana and your group additional mana, and I think that may be worth it over the damage from Divine Storm. All right, talking about Priest, I'm gonna go ahead and do it's a slight shadow, just enough for Shadow Word Pain and a Holy build, and that's to maximize the damage plus being able to keep your tank alive on these potentially larger pulls. So I've included the runes. Now I'm gonna go through first on this one just to give you some background. So you obviously have the option of Penance. I think Penance is probably what I would run. I think it's fantastic. It gives you that heal that's just going to save your tank out of nowhere, which is, you really don't want to be wiping, right? That's your big time loss here. The other option is you have Mindseer. Mindseer does solid AoE damage. I think it's worth testing to see how much it's doing, if your tank needs the healing. If you can contribute to damage AoE wise, this is going to be amazing, but it really depends if you can keep your tank alive or not. And then we've got Void Plague, which is your dot from your chest rune, really solid damage. Be applying this as you can on targets with more HP, like the highest HP targets, so it has time to tick. And then Shared Pain, I think, is going to be worthwhile. It applies your Shadow Word Pain to 3 targets, or 2 additional targets, I should say. So when you're doing those pulls, go ahead and tab target, kind of apply it to 6, 8, 9 mobs, right? RNG may kind of mess you up a little bit, but I think it's going to add a lot to the damage for a relatively minimal mana cost, and I think you'll still be able to keep people alive without Prayer of Mending. You could also run Homunculi here. I just think it's going to be a pain to make sure they're constantly attacking and things like that, just because the AI is a little wonky. So for me, I'm just going to be running Shared Pain. Also, Prayer Mending, honorable mention, pretty good ability as well. So consider that one in here, especially if you have a pet that's going to be taunting off to kind of be the fuel for that Prayer Mending. For Priest talents, I'm going to go ahead a little bit into Shadow, like I said, and then we're going to go Spirit Tap. Try to aim to get last hits here if you can. This is amazing if you do, but if not, it's not the end of the world. You may occasionally get some with your dots, which is helpful. We're going to take Improved Shadow Word Pain. The 6 additional seconds may be slightly wasted in some cases, depending how quickly you're killing, but if you are applying this to multiple mobs, you're getting a lot of value out of this talent, so I still think it's worth a pick. We're going to take Healing Focus to reduce our interruption chance by 70%. This is great. And then Holy Spec, we're going to go in here, get that 3% crit. Now, at this point, we could go into Divine Fury. I think I am actually going to go here and take that heal and greater heal reduction. And then I think Inspiration is really important. This is giving all your heals basically an ability to give your armor, or give your target 25% armor when you crit for 15 seconds. This is massive for AoE pulling and larger pulls. And so definitely take that talent. We're taking Holy Nova because it's 1 point. It's some AoE. Not sure how much you're going to use it. Obviously, don't spam all your mana on this, but if it's a giant pull, this can be useful as well. And then we're going to go ahead and go back into Holy Spec. The reason we're going Holy Spec is because we're benefiting Inspiration, right? We want that critical strike. We'll take 15% reduction on greater heal, lesser heal, and heal. This is fantastic, obviously. And then we've got Holy Reach, which is going to increase the radius of our Holy Nova. This is debatable. I think you could take this. I'm going to finish off crit first, and then we'll take 1 point in here. At this point, you're level 36. We're going to take Spirit of Redemption. Again, wiping is a bad idea. You don't want to die either, obviously, but I think this is worth a point in case it saves your group and someone else can res maybe. And then we'll take our points to Spiritual Guidance to finish us up. So I think this is a really strong build. If you did want to cut the Shadow and just prioritize more into Holy, I think that's fine. You know, it would look something along the lines. We'll go ahead and take this into this, and so you take these points out here. So your build would look something along this. This is level 39. Obviously at 40 you'd probably respec, but this is the build I would run for that. You're going to be a very strong healer, but also I think the shadow piece of this is important because you want to be contributing damage where you can. That obviously is going to speed up your dungeon clear time. So let's talk about Rogue real quick. First, I'm going to go over the runes. Let's talk about Deadly Brew. I think Deadly Brew is going to be worth it because it allows you to just not put poisons on your weapons at all. Lets you put Sharpening Stones, take advantage of Wind Fury. Your other options for chest, unless you want to be doing a backstab build, aren't great. So let's go ahead and stick with Deadly Brew. Saber Slash has been your bread and butter. I think it will continue to be your bread and butter here. You know, you could do some Mutilate build, but Saber Slash is just better. Let's go with that. And then for legs, I don't think Envenom is going to be worth your time, mostly because the mobs are going to die too quickly. You can obviously experiment with it, but I think you're going to find more value in Between the Eyes. And the reason for that is it allows you to be able to stun mobs that are about to run away. Also, I think you may consider putting Crippling Poison on your offhand in a lot of these dungeons, especially specifically stockades, but anywhere where there's a lot of running, and that'll prevent you from pulling a ton of extras. All right, so for rogue talents, I'm going to go ahead and show an assassination level 25 build that I would use, and then at level 30, you're going to respec that to Blade Flurry. Blade Flurry is just too good. You're getting that cleave. It's up all the time, right? This is up for 15 seconds every 2 minutes, so amazing ability. You're going to want this as soon as you can get it. But anyway, what you're going to do initially is going to be improve Sinister Strike. You want this on every single rogue build, essentially. We're going to take Remorseless Attacks. This is going to give us that 40% crit post-kill. You know, think about using this with Ambush or Backstab instead of just spamming Saber Slash because you can get a lot more value out of it. But if you're spending time stealth, not attacking mobs, then this, you know, don't waste too much time doing that. And then we're going to go ahead and put 3 points into Malice. This is going to move us to the next tier. I think I'm going to go 2 points into Murder to get that flat damage. And then we're going to take Improved Slice and Dice. We're currently level 21, so I'll finish up Malice. We'll take a point into Relentless Strikes. That's going to give us additional energy when we use combo points. And then we'll take Ruthlessness. So this is what you're going to start with. At this point, I think it makes sense to continue to put points into Ruthlessness. We're going to put one more to give us the next tier. And then really this opens up a bunch of potential options, right? You can increase the damage dealt by your poisons. You can increase the chance to apply. You can increase crit damage. I think all these are totally viable, and you'll only be using these for a few levels. So I wouldn't worry too much about this. I'm going to go ahead and put one more here, and then I'm going to just take Lethality. But I do kind of enjoy the poison. So at this point, you'll be level 30, and you're going to respec. So let's wipe these out. I'm still going to put those points into Improved Sinister Strike for combat. And then we're going to go Improved Gouge. Dodge also can be good. I just think this is more useful for emergency scenarios. Keep in mind, though, that Saber Slash is applying a bleed, and then also you have Deadly Brew on your chest, which is putting on Deadly Poison. So either use this like off the bat or just realize that it's not going to be like a permanent, right? It's like an interrupt type deal. And then we're going to go ahead and take the hit chance from position here. And that leaves us with a few different options. We're not really going backstab build, but if you want to, you know, potentially apply the backstab rune occasionally, then I don't think it's terrible to put these points here. Your other option is to go into Riposte, which would be good just in general. Obviously, you're not tanking, but if you're pulling threat, this ability is 10 energy, 150 weapon damage on a short cooldown, assuming it's usable. So very powerful if you can use it. I'm going to put these in backstab for fun, kind of. And then that also leaves us with the ability to reduce the cost of sprint and evasion, or give us ability for sprint to break, movement and pairing effects. This is your call, I think. I'm going to go ahead and put it in endurance. Evasion is really nice for dungeon tanking, so let's go ahead and do that. For this, I'll put the points into dual wield spec. You can also take The kick interrupt, I don't think this is that great. It basically makes your kick have a silence on it. And then dagger spec, you can take this if you have a really good fast dagger. It's just not going to add a ton of damage. Neither is dual wield spec, to be fair, so neither of these are great, but that does give us access to the blade flurry. This is what makes combat good. So be using this on your pulls. Make sure it's big enough. Don't just waste it, because it is a 2-minute cooldown, which isn't very long, but long enough to not have it when you need it. From here, you're going to want to go into the spec that you're using. You know, if you're using a sword and a dagger, I don't hate just going sword spec. Like, it's fine. Whatever's in your main hand really is what you should be using here. Ideally, if you could have, you know, 2 of the same weapon, that would be great, but not necessarily required. I do want to give an honorable mention to mace spec. I think this is really slept on in general. Yes, it will do less damage than sword spec or fist weapon spec or dagger spec, but it allows you to just constantly be stunning these mobs. It prevents them from running away. So I actually really like this for dungeon farming. It just makes you into much more of a utility rogue, but also you're still doing good damage. We're going to go ahead and put these points though into sword spec. And then we're going to take weapon expertise. This is going to give us that skill for sword, fist, dagger. This is fantastic. Definitely get this as soon as possible. Then we can finish out sword spec or go into aggression. I think it's totally fine either way. I'll finish out sword spec and put 2 points into aggression. This increased the damage of saber slash by 4%. And then we're level 40. Here's Adrenaline Rush. I think this build is going to be absolutely nutty in damage for dungeons, specifically because of that Blade Flurry. So I think you're going to do great with this. All right, let's talk Shaman. Specifically, I'm going to be focused on tanking and enhancement in this guide because that's how I would level my Shaman. So let's talk about the runes. For runes, you have the option for gloves of Molten Blast or Water Shield. Now, Molten Blast is going to be good if you're trying to be doing bigger pulls, maybe with a shield as well. We'll get into that, maybe using Shield Mastery later. I think that's totally fine, doing big pulls, grabbing a ton of mobs, and then getting threat on them with Molten Blast, Fire Nova toteming, Mage coming in. I think that's totally fine, depending on if that's an AoE build you want to go. I also think that if you want to go just kind of dual wield with Water Shield, that you can be totally fine with that, losing Molten Blast and just doing double Rock Biter and keeping threat, or just doing damage that way. For legs, we have Way of the Earth and Shamanistic Rage. I'd highly recommend getting 2 pairs of pants, one with Way of the Earth on it that you're going to wear all the time, and then one with Shamanistic Rage that you can put a macro for to swap on and go ahead and use that in between pulls to gain mana. It's just a crazy amount of mana and also gives it to your group. If you're not running double Rockbiter at the time of using this rune, make sure you make a macro or get a second Rockbiter weapon, put it on your offhand, and then go ahead and use that first. That's going to make sure you have the most melee attack power to benefit from the mana regeneration of Shamanistic Rage. And then for our chest rune, I think dual wield specialization is absolutely crazy. You get 10% hit on both your melee attacks and your spells, so insane rune here. I think that if you're not using a shield and dual wielding is the only rune to go. If you don't have that, because I think you have to pay for that one, there's also Shield Mastery, which is just a basic good one. It's nice for when you have a shield swap. Also will generate you a little bit of mana. So if you're doing the Molten Blast build with Shield Mastery and Way of the Earth, I think that's going to be quite strong. You just need to go into it with the proper mindset as you're doing these polls and make sure your team is around you and knows what they're doing properly. Let's go ahead and talk about Shaman talents now. For talents, I'm going to go ahead and take 5 points into Shield Spec. This is going to give you that 5% increased block chance and increase the amount blocked. This goes really well with Shield Mastery. But also, if you're not even using a shield and you're dual wielding, I still think this is worth the points. Your other option is 5% mana, which really you're not going to get a ton of value from. The percent mana does work with Water Shield, so something to keep in mind. Also with the Shield Block Mastery rune. But if you're running that Shield Mastery rune, you really should be running Shield Spec as well. So I would take this on all Shamans that are enhancement, and then we're going to go Thundering Strikes, get 5% crit. At this point, I think if you're tank, you want to take Guardian Totems. If you're DPS, I think you take Enhancing Totems. If you're a tank and you're not taking any damage, then still take Enhancing Totems. I'm going to go ahead and put the points there for now. We're going to go ahead and take 3% dodge. I think you could take 1 point in here. It's not a big deal if you want to go ahead and be ready to grab a two-handed weapon. Now, you may have to level your weapon skill, and you'll lose double Rockbiter, which is unfortunate. So I don't really think this is worth it, but if you're interested in it, maybe worth a point. We're going to go ahead and put 5 into Flurry here. This is going to make our attack speed increase by 30% when we crit for 3 swings. This is awesome. And then we want to be able to parry. This is just 1 point for so much value, right? This gives us melee haste when we're parrying, so this is great. And then next, we're going to go Elemental Weapons. This will give us 20% additional melee attack power from Rockbiter. This is absolutely nutty damage. Very good. If we're using Wind Fury, obviously that benefits as well. I don't think it's going to be worth to use Wind Fury, honestly. So yeah. let's go ahead and do one more into weapon totems here, and then that's going to give us Wind Fury totem up by 15%. If you have a bunch of classes that are benefiting from Wind Fury, right, you can swap these points. That's totally fine. You can also just put a second point here and then put 4 into Weapon Mastery. I think that's fine as well, but I'm going to go ahead and put 5 into Weapon Mastery and then Storm Strike. You're level 40 at this point. So this build, I think, can kind of both tank and do damage depending on if you're wearing a shield or using double Rock Biter. It should be really effective, and like I said, you can kind of interchange the runes with whatever you want for leveling, but this build is just going to be fantastic. All right, let's talk about Warlocks first, specifically looking at the runes. I'll talk about Shadow Bolt Volley here in a second, but the bread and butter here, we got Chaos Bolt for gloves, just a big single target nuke. We've got Lake of Fire, which is going to increase your fire damage in that area by 40% when you use Rain of Fire, which is what you'll be using in some situations. And then we have Incinerate, which increases your fire damage by 15% flat. Now for Shadow Bolt Volley, what I want to talk about there is essentially you get a new rank of Shadow Bolt at level 28, while you don't get a new rank of Hellfire until 32 or 34, I believe. So with Shadow Bolt, it's going to get a lot stronger at that level 28, and if you're doing Shadow Bolt Volley, that also offers you the ability to now do critical hits, which you couldn't do with Rain of Fire, as well as taking access to that rune talent that's giving you the double damage on critical strike of destruction spells. Now, this isn't going to be as good if you're pulling 15 mobs, right? You're going to be wanting to use Rain of Fire for that. But if you've got like 5 mobs left over, this is really good at cleaning them up. Make sure you're targeting like the highest health mob when you're using this though, because if the mob dies right before this hits, then you lose out on the hits on everyone, right? Because you stopped casting. So that's my advice for this. Let's go ahead and hop into talent. All right, let's talk about Warlock talent specifically. Now, if you're going to go the Shadow Bolt Volley build at all, I'm going to say that it's worth going Improved Shadow Bolt. Also, we're taking Bane. Now, for Improved Shadow Bolt, you're giving up 5% mana cost on your Destro spells. I think this is pretty okay. If you'd like to run this instead, go for it. But we're going to move on. We're going Bane, reduce the cost cast time of Shadow Bolt, and Immolate. This is good. Then we're going to take our 5% crit from Devastation for our Destro spells and Shadow Burn. This is going to be your level 25 starting build. From here, I'm going to say that Intensity is the way to go. This is going to make sure that if a mob pulls off from your tank during the pull because you pulled aggro or whatever, that it's not going to always interrupt or push back your Hellfire or Rain of Fire. So we're going to keep that. Then we're taking Destructive Reach. This is great. Specifically, I think around Rain of Fire and Hellfire, right? It just makes those areas larger. It's good. And then Ruin is fantastic. This is increasing your crit damage by 100%. Amazing for Shadow Bolt Volley, and also very good for Chaos Bolt and Incinerate. We're going to take Pyroclasm here. I think this is also quite good, especially if you have big AoE pulls going on, right? If your tank has 15 mobs on him, this 26% chance to stun for 3 seconds is going to be applying a lot and reduce his damage a lot. So quite good, I think, here in this specific situation. After that, you can go initial damage on Immolate if you want. I'm going to take 2% mana cost reduction on Destro spells, and then I'm going to take Ember Storm for 10% additional fire damage. This is just going to give you a well-rounded build where you could use Shadow Bolt Volley or Rain of Fire, depending on what you want, and Hellfire once you're that level if you have a healer that's going to be able to keep you up. But I think this build is just going to be really strong both in AoE and it'll be okay in single target. Last but not least, we have Warrior. Now, there are a couple of ways to handle this, and I think my recommendation is that you respec at least when you get Whirlwind at level 34, but maybe when you get Sweeping Strikes at 30. I think dual wield without that is going to be stronger. You're just going to be having a more fluid rage generation and be doing, good damage. But I also think that once you get access to that AoE from Sweeping Strikes, it's just going to be worthwhile to go that spec instead. And with Whirlwind, I think definitely it's going to be worth going that spec. So before you get to level 30 for Sweeping Strikes or 34 for Whirlwind, I think you should be using Single-Minded Fury for gloves, Raging Blow for chest, and Consumed by Rage for legs. Now, I do want to mention it looks like Consumed by Rage is going to be reduced to only increasing your damage by 10% when you're above 80 rage, or while that buff is active above 80 rage, and right now it does 20%. So I don't think it's going to be quite as good going into next phase. So moving on to what I think you should do potentially post 30, but definitely post 34, is switching to a two-hander and going with the runes Quick Strike, Flagellation, and Frenzied Assault. Now, Quick Strike is just a good rage dump. Now, don't spam this like crazy. It's just a way to get rid of your additional rage. And yeah, that's basically it. Now, Flagellation, this is going to get better as you get Berserker Rage. When you get Berserker Rage, you can be using this all the time. Be using Berserker Rage on cooldown. That'll just give you 25% additional damage. It's huge. For Frenzied Assault, This is going to increase your attack speed by 20% with a two-hander. I just don't want to deal with Consumed by Rage. I think you could if you wanted to. I think it's a fine build, but Frenzied Assault is going to just give you more rage generation in general. So I think this is good. All right, let's talk about warrior talents now. Like I said, I'm going to be going dual wield till either 30 or 34, depending on what I'm feeling. Now, that dual wield spec is going to be the same that you see a lot of warrior raiders do, which is going into deep wounds and improved overpower. So this is your level 25 build. Overpower is key. Be using that off of cooldown. Deep wounds will not get as much value as, for example, BFD bosses, because things just die quicker, but it's still the best we're going to get. I think we're going to go ahead towards 30 by getting points into cruelty to get that extra crit. Now, once you get this extra point, you're 30, so you could respec to sweeping strikes. If you don't want to until you get Whirlwind, then you're going to go ahead and go Unbridled Wrath all the way to 5 points. Now, at this point, you're going to respec to take advantage of that AoE that you're now going to bring. We're going to go Improve Rend. I'm not going to say all these because it's the exact same build I just went through. So here's the exact same setup I had. And then we're going to go ahead and go into Impale to get that extra crit damage. And then we're going to go 3 into two-handed spec and take our sweeping strikes. Now we're level 30. Awesome. This is huge damage. 30-second cooldown. Very powerful ability. You want a slow weapon with this, ideally. Now, you can also go into these specs here if you like. Get extra sword swings if you have the epic 2H from BFD. Also, axe crit chance is great. I'm going to go ahead and put 2 points into two-hand weapon spec. I think these are all quite debatable. But from here, we can go ahead and start putting points into cruelty. And the reason for that is, what are you really going to put these into here? Sword spec, maybe. But you gain a lot from critting, so I think you want to be going crit here. Now, at this point, I would turn back to the arms tree. And if you have an axe, you want the extra crit here. Otherwise, sword spec is fine. I'm going to, I guess, go ahead and go sword spec. And then boom, here, this would be your 40th point, and you're done. So this is what I would use for DPS Warrior while dungeon grinding. All right, let's talk about Warrior Tank briefly here. I think dual wielding is the way to go. You definitely might try going Sweeping Strikes and AoE, kind of the build I talked about before, as a planned tank. Go ahead and give it a shot if you like, but I'm probably would go Fury all the way. So for that spec, I'm going to go 5% crit chance into Cruelty. Then we're going to go Unbridled Wrath for additional rage. Now here, there's a lot of options. I think 1 point into Piercing Howl is worth it. This is so powerful, especially in like stockades or something when you have a lot of mobs that can run away and pull more. I think this is great. We're going to put 4 points into Improved Battle Shout. You could go Blood Craze. I really don't think it's as good. Also, Improved Cleave could be good, but especially if you have other melees, Improved Battle Shout is great. And then we want to go in Rage. This is going to just make you deal 25% more damage a lot of the time. Very powerful. I think you should definitely take this. Now, Improved Slam's useless. Dual Wield spec is okay if you have no other points to put in. Improved Execute's okay, but you don't really want to be dumping all of your Rage. So we're going to go 1 point into Death Wish, and I think at this point, this is where you start to look at the other talents. If you're going raw damage, these two are fine. I tend to like Cleave if you're using it a lot. We'll finish off Battle Shout here, and then I think I'm actually going to take Demo. The reason for this is going to allow you to, one, it's going to generate more threat because you're lowering their attack power by more, but also it's going to give you additional survivability on those longer pulls. And then from here, Flurry's an easy pick. It's going to give you a 30% attack speed increase for your next 3 swings, and then obviously you're 40 at this point. So I think this is a really powerful tank build. You would be using dual wield most of the time and then shield swap when you have it. This isn't going to be amazing for stockades because in stockades you're going to get disarmed a lot, unfortunately, but there's not really a ton of way around it if you're planning on doing a warrior tank and your alliance spamming dungeons. I'm going to go ahead and end it there since this was a pretty long video. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. This one was a decent amount of fun to make, but definitely a lot of work. But best of luck out there for phase 2. I'll see you later. Cam out.